One. Well, welcome to the King Connections interview. I'm here to interview one of my tribe members for my Connectionally Intelligent Tribe, Nkenge Yasin. Um, and we're going to start today by really getting a chance to really understand what a conscious leader is, what one that works in Baltimore City looks like, and more importantly, we'll get a chance to know Nkenge from a context of her being the co-founder of Busy Bees, learning how. She's also a real estate investor. She's an advocate for child development, and she's a passionate, conscious leader in Baltimore City who believes that through servitude, you can change lives. And changing lives to early encounters is one of her favorite things she loves to say. So with that being said, I want to welcome to the King Connections interview Nkenge Yasin. How you doing today, Nkenge?
Thank you, Mr. King. I am great. Not what I like to say, what I like to do. I'm intentional about everything that we do. So it's not just say, we are changing lives through early encounters.
Well, thank you for that correction. Now, you know how I like to get things started on any interview that I do, any show that I do, is really find out what your spiritual energy number is from 0 to 10, from 0 being life sucks to 10 being life is awesome. Where would you say you fall in on that?
I am always off the chart. As prior to meeting you, I probably would have said some days that my spiritual energy level might have been a 5 or a 6. But as you always express, you don't see any other reason for choosing anything less than a 10. I've chosen to not choose anything less than being off the meters. So I am a 20 today.
Well, every time I've talking to you, you've always had such a energy that you bring to the table, enthusiasm. So that 20, I think you sustain that. So thank you for sharing that. And as you know, the reason I asked that question is because I believe that energy is everything, like Einstein says, and everything is energy. And me, I don't like dealing with people who answer twos or threes because you're not going to bring good energy to the conversation. You're not going to be present, engaged, and you're not going to be someone who is open to an honest discussion. But you at 20, so I know we're going to create infinite possibilities with our discussion today. So thank you for indulging me with that question. And as we begin, one of the things that I really admire about you is the fact that you are steadfast in your servitude and being a servant leader. When I first met you, you were working at a community center in a neighborhood that you grew up in but no longer lived in, but you were over there providing service, working with the community, and doing your part to make those residents' lives as easy or better as it could possibly be from their perspective. So now, with that being said, my question for you to get things started is, what do you see as the greatest challenges facing children in Baltimore City?
Um, So I think that is a loaded question, because I think that there are so many things challenging both children in Baltimore City. One of the things definitely would be a lack of hope, a lack of vision to be able to see outside of their circumstances. Of course, lack of resources to be able to make those dreams manifest. And but most importantly, I would say love, and that's what learning how uh, stands on. That's what our premise of our child development is, based in love and everything surrounding what love is. So I would say that one of the biggest challenges in Baltimore City that children face and people in general face is a lack of love.
Interesting, interesting. Lack of love. Love is that infinite power that we all want to connect with. We all want to be, we want to sing about it. We want to feel it. We want to say it. We want to write about it. We want to express it. So lack of love is definitely something that's very, I would say, devastating. Now, as we talk about love, I'm curious to know, are there certain strategies that you implement in learning how to kind of get more parents involved and engaged with this love that you want to bring to the community and to the children?
Absolutely, absolutely. So first, I always think that anything starts with you. And so with that being said, our process for our staff and the way that we do professional development, personal development, is always incorporated in how we will continue to evolve as an early childhood program. So what I will say that we do, all of the staff do when you first come in our facility, there is a gratitude board. So just in case anybody's spiritual energy level is at a level 2 when they come in, by the time they finish writing in this, our minimum amount of words or sentences on that board is 3 sentences, because there's so many things to be grateful for. Nobody can ever just sum it up in one sentence. So we encourage our staff every morning to write on that board prior. I don't care if you're running late, you have to write on that board what you're grateful for, because I think that
Mm.
puts you in a space of and it's funny because I took a picture of the board today because somebody failed to write on it, and I sent it out in our group text, like it looks like somebody's gratitude is missing, because I think that's so important. When I don't care what you're going through, if you wake up, if you have your sight, even if you don't have your sight, I mean, literally, I know it's easier said than done, but if you have the ability to talk, to walk, all of those things should start your day off in gratitude. And I know we've worked together, King, on so many different levels, whether it be you mentoring me, counseling me crying on your shoulder about anything. So, but one thing that I've learned from you, and I'm not going to toot your horn this whole podcast, but one of the
You
things
can.
one of the things that I've learned from you is that you always have said to me, if someone didn't have their sight or something, they will really see how unimportant that bill that they were stressing about, or whatever it was that they were stressing about. And that really resonated with me. And so I've taken that over into my work, to say to because my, like you said in previously, my work is servitude. I enjoy helping other people, and a part of that is being intentional with even the way that people think. And so that's one of the things that we do in the morning to start that gratitude. So that's one strategy, is starting with our staff internally, making sure that they have what they need to be able to exude that love. I always offer, and this is something simple that I'm thinking of as as I'm talking through this. Every morning I drop the children off, and I'm trying to really be a real boss and come out of my technician space and really work on my business instead of work on my business instead of in my business as much. But one of the things that I'm really intentional about that always makes me feel really good is a hug. It's something about a hug that um that really makes me feel better some days. And so every morning when I drop the children off, I always ask them, because I always want to respect their boundaries. Sometimes, even though I love a hug, I don't want a hug from everybody. You know, that little creepy guy walking down the street, I don't want a hug from
I
him.
was thinking about that.
Yeah, so just in case I'm that creepy person in somebody else's eyes, I want to make sure I'm mindful and respectful of boundaries. But I ask my children every morning, do they want a hug before they get out? Some children say yes, some children say no. Some children always say no. This morning, this one little boy, he's one of the older children. He may be 11. I asked him, I said, do you want a hug? And he said yes. And I was shocked, right? Because I've been taking him to school since September the 1st. Now here we are, October, 24th. And today was the first day he said yes to wanting that hug. And I'm gonna assume that he wanted a hug all of the other days. But anyway, it's those small intentional things that learning how does, making sure they tell children that they can be anything that they want to be, and even their parents. And one of the things that I was confident about prior to opening this new space is that childcare was a place where you could leverage those trust and relationships with parents to connect them to resources. And we are doing that now. So once people trust you with their children and they see that you are loving them, you're being nice to them no matter what. They block the fire lane. You ask them, can you please not block the fire lane? And they cuss you out and you're still nice to them. It's that intentional. And all of that is from all of us doing our own personal development to understand that those things are not personal. These are the bad names that they're calling me. It's not acceptable. We're definitely gonna have a meeting about it and talk about discuss it later, but it's not a reason to dismiss them. It's not a reason to get rid of them. And so, with that being said, our strategies are simple strategies of connecting with people at a human level and letting them know that you are loved no matter what. We're going to be here for you no matter what. It gets challenging sometimes, but being intentional about how you deal with and interact with parents and understanding that all of the research that we've read isn't something that's going to be fixed overnight. You can't work in a community where people have been oppressed and traumatized and still being traumatized all these years and expect for them to appreciate you as soon as you come in. So I would say our strategy is definitely working internally without in ourselves and making sure we exude that over into our children, in addition to connecting them to different resources, supports, counseling, all of those kind of things. But I think the most important that is always missed is what you need to do within yourself in order to be able to help someone else, because it's going to be challenging working with people who have been beat down for so long.
Absolutely, absolutely. As you talk about being beat down for so long, I'm new to Baltimore. I've only been in Baltimore for about maybe 6 years. And prior to coming to Baltimore, the only thing I've heard about Baltimore was The Wire, The Corner, and I tell folks I listen to all of the, you read the media, the news, everything is either death, drugs, violence, murder, crime, poverty, it's corruption, scandal. Those are the dominating headlines that come out of Baltimore City. And my question for you in that context, because you've gone through your share of trauma, you've worked with clients that go through their share of trauma, you have friends that have gone through their share of trauma. How do you deal with trauma, and how do you help people to overcome it as well?
That's a great question, King, and I want to answer that by first expressing that people don't overcome trauma, or I will say, I have not overcome trauma. I have learned how to navigate trauma, just like we have not overcome racism. We've started to learn how to navigate through that process of
Yeah.
racism, like what that looks like. I mean, every time I read the headlines, it's trauma, it's racism. They're just always happening, right? So it's a matter of learning how to navigate through that process of trauma. And what that looks like first is tapping into a source or a higher energy than myself, to understand that racism, trauma, none of that can trump uh what 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 ability I have to attract, to create. And so you don't get I don't think that people get over trauma. They learn how to navigate through it. And I there are several ways to navigating through it. And one is always evolving, really continuing to grow, to get better. I definitely believe that servitude is a must, and I'm learning that more and more in my older years, that I've naturally been someone that I like to help people. I serve, like you said, when we met, I was at the community association, and that really wasn't intentional. Like, it's like, I'm a around the way girl. I gotta go visit back around the way, see what they need. And I think that's something culturally that Black people just have in them. They want to go, everybody wants to go back to their hood and support in some kind of way. It's a part of you. And so no matter how successful, how far you get away from that, it's naturally in you to do that. But what I will say is, once I became more intentional with that servitude, I started to see my life flourish in different ways that were beyond my imagination. And so I think definitely one of the ways to getting over trauma is helping trauma. I always like to liken myself to and people hate, well, one person hates when I say this, but I like to liken people to sacrificial lambs. Like, things happen to you, they're not happening to you, they're happening for you. And that's you should always look at those traumatic experiences as an opportunity to save several other people. So, for instance, if I was a teen mom, right? And nothing's wrong with being a teen mom, but I definitely would encourage a teenager or to explore, have their space to see the world. And I think through what we are doing by exposing children to horseback riding, to exposing children to golf, to things that are beyond their scope of getting bored and going hanging out with their girlfriends, smoking weed, or doing whatever the environment creates for you to be able to do. I think that exposure will eliminate some of those bored things that they would typically do in, again, like those environments. So back to your original question, I know that people learn how to navigate through trauma. They learn how to be really resilient, and being intentional about how can you help or what you can do to change things is how you navigate that process.
Excellent, excellent. So, what are three key things you've learned about raising children in Baltimore City that can be helpful to other families that you would recommend?
So, I always got to preface everything that I say with my own thoughts. So, one of the things about positioning yourself as an expert on children is that children will always make a liar out of you. So as soon as you say what parents should do, your child will go and do the opposite and make a fool of you. So I want to preface this by saying that these are my hypothesis of what I think would three things that would help raise children, because my children, every time I think of something that I would say, oh no, not my child, they wouldn't do that, they do it. So I'm not going to say that I am the expert, because the expert doesn't exist, because they're little human beings on their own journey doing what they need to do to get to whatever space they need to get to. One of the things that I would suggest would be to keep children extremely busy. Your grandmother said when you were younger that the too much free time was the devil's playground. I understand what that means now. I think children need to stay extremely busy. My son, when he was leaving basketball, he was going to hockey, from hockey to lacrosse. He didn't have a break in between his development, and it was things that he enjoyed doing. And now I'm really proud to say that he works in a school now and is a coach, is about to be an assistant coach. So I think that those things are really important. I think you have to ground your children in something spiritual, whatever that may look like for you, whether it even whatever that may look like for you. I think your children need to have that time to be able to ground themselves. I think they need to be grounded in something spiritual, not religious, something spiritual. Even if it's some type of work that they're doing. My son and I, we used to go and feed the homeless. Um, um, there's so many different things that they could do. And then the third thing I would say is creating a village of trusted adults. On my Parenting Doesn't Come with a Book class that we host on every Tuesday, one of the Natasha is her name. I want to give credit to who said that. And that was so profound for me, because she said she's a school counselor, and she said that children are not going to always feel comfortable coming to their parents to talk. And if I think of my experience as a child, you think of your experience as a child, there are some things that you are just not going to talk to your mom and your dad about. But she said, create that village of trusted adults. And I totally agree that you need to work on creating that village of trusted adults, because there are so many things that I wish I had someone that I could have talked to, or decisions that I wanted to make growing up as a teenager that I wish I would have had someone, well, not wish, because I never live in regret, but I know would have been helpful for me, or would be helpful for other children growing up. So creating a village of trusted adults would be the third thing.
What's interesting, and I'm not comparing children to dogs at all, but when you raise a dog, a puppy, some of the things they teach you is that if you don't keep a dog It's a tired dog is a happy dog. So you have to make sure the dog stays active, the dog stays is
Mhm.
walked, his mind is full of mental as well as physical stimulation. And when you mentioned the fact of keeping a child busy as one of the things you suggested, that's what I immediately thought. I don't have any children myself, so that's what I have to compare it to. But I look at things from a context of universal law. Stephen R. Covey teaches us in the book, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, that everything's based on principles. And I've lived my life now according to principles, and principles are universal laws that you can't break. You break yourself against those laws, but you can't break the laws. And it seems to be universal that no matter what you're developing in the context of raising something, keeping it busy and keeping it active is the best way to keep it from going down a different, destructive, aggressive path. Now, with that context being set, my next question for you is what age do you think that is important to really begin to start to shape a young child's mind, to start keeping them busy? You know, at what age do you start implementing that particular strategy? Is it 3 months, 3 years, 5 years? Again, as a person who doesn't have any children, I don't have any idea. So I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
That is a phenomenal question, King. And the reason that that is such a phenomenal question is because this is what separates the babysitters from child development. So I know that's a question you've asked me in the past, but this question here is really what separates them because the child development specialist understands how to answer that question. And the way that I would answer that question or the answer to that question is you start at birth.
Hmm.
And so every child development specialist, every neurologist, every early childhood professional is somewhere screaming to the top of their lungs, yes, she got that answer right. Because birth to 5 are the most critical years in brain development. And because it's the most critical years in brain development, you want to infuse all of those things into their brain. You want to create the environments and the spaces for them to be able to learn and grow in their own capacity from birth to 5. And there is tons and tons of research, and I don't always go on just one set of research because I think research has its cultural biases and all of that great stuff, but this is the one research that I can say I agree with typically across the board because children are children no matter what culture. So birth to 5 are the most critical years of brain development, and it has shown that it will change the trajectory of what their test scores will be in college, and I am absolutely certain of that. Not so much from just I've worked with children directly and just seeing what kind of things that you can change or prevent in those times. So I'll give you a scenario. Let's just say you have a child and we have these they're called developmentally appropriate practices. So from every month is so critical in child development from birth to 5 because if they are not hitting, and all children won't develop equally. However, they should there should be a gauge. Like let's just say I'm not in front of the textbook, but let's just say it's from birth to 3 months. Children should be doing certain things. There's certain cues to let you know that they're on task for development. Then it'll jump, let's say it keeps evolving in 3 month increments. And if you see some of those things not happening in that time, it's so important that you can jump in and you can start creating environments that will help support those things that would typically become a delay later. So if a lot of things are caught in the time of birth to 5, it can be corrected easily. So let's just say a child is having trouble, a child, it's time for a child at this time, a atypical child developing should be sitting up at this time. If they're not sitting up at that time, then we can start getting them some type of physical therapy to help the is their brain not registering to their spine that they should be sitting up. What other apparatus could we use to start incorporating to help them start developing in that way? And so the to answer your question, you start immediately. You do not listen to Big Mama, and now Big Mama is right about a lot of things, but just a baby being held in the womb for 9 months and then just being laid down and don't pick him up because he'll be spoiled. Absolutely not. You can't hold a baby for 9 months inside of you, nurture it, have everything that it needs in this warm, cozy blanket, and then drop it off as soon as it gets here on earth. So birth is the day one is when you start being that parent, keeping them engaged, figuring out what their needs are. Day one is the answer to that question.
Now, one of the things I want to, applaud you for and commend you for is you've done something that I think that people take for granted in Baltimore City or any inner city in America. The cities like Baltimore, St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta in particular, it's very difficult to raise a black young male child. It's difficult to grow up as a young black male child. I remember when I was growing up, they were telling us that, we'd be lucky to see the age of 25 because, if you don't die, then you're going to get strung out on drugs. If you don't get strung out on drugs, then you're going to go to jail. So those were pretty much the more certain directions you were going to go in. And it's gotten worse. Each generation has come behind me. And so you've done something I think that's very difficult to do in Baltimore City, which is to raise a young black male child. Because now your son is how old?
23.
So now my question with that being said is what did you do to help keep your son away from, because one of the things that I always tell people that the reason that drugs dealing is such an attractive uh, business for young black men to get involved in is because that's the only thing in America that young black men are never discriminated against. The streets are always hiring. You never get told, well, you're black, you can't work here, or you're young, or you're ignorant, you're stupid. No reason are you turned or denied the ability to go out here and sell drugs to your community. So streets are always hiring. So now, with that being said, what did you do to help your son navigate the waters of racism, structural systems that's gonna, like I said, try to direct him to jail, drugs, peer pressure, all the things that are there in place to make sure he fails? What did you do to keep him on the right path?
Um, so King, I would say that that is not a question that most parents can own. Uh, and what I mean by that, let me think how I'm going to answer this. Like, what I mean by that is depending on what environment you're raising your young black boy in, sometimes can supersede your parenting. I came from a two-parent household. My father was a Nation of Islam, former Vietnam veteran, left the military, went AWOL, was not doing anything that was of the white man after seeing how unfairly we were treated in Vietnam. And he was raising six of us, but three young black boys. And he did things like I'm just painting a picture for you. He had them in extracurricular. He was the extracurricular. He got up in the morning, went running and exercising. My brothers and my sisters that are older than me can pride themselves on still to this day being able to do push-ups on their knuckles because they've been doing them since they were about 2 years old. They went running. They were vegetarian. They ate well. They ate dinner together. They um they they went to the mosque. They prayed. They um they had other, experiences together. But it's a two-parent household that you would, and we were proud to be the one of very few children in our neighborhood that had a dad at home, mother and father. My mother worked for brokerage firms in Washington, D.C. We were never eligible. She made so much money. We were never eligible for resources, but we were still poor. We lived in houses with no heat, didn't even have furnaces. We moved 26 times before I was even 5. So they're the typical poor family, two-parent household with a father that is mother and father that are doing their absolute best. But they were in a community where the drug dealer was glorified. And so it didn't matter. My father was a street peddler. He sold everything that you could imagine, which is where I get my hustle from. And it did not change that he could not keep 3 boys from going to the street. Now, as long as they were still afraid of him, he had them at home. But at some point, children stop fearing their parents.
Right.
And so much so it was to their demise. The streets was to their demise. As you know, that I've lost 2 brothers to senseless gun violence. But they had the what would be a great path or a great start in a different environment. If they were in Waldorf or in a prestigious county, they would have been lawyers, doctors. I know my younger brother definitely would have been something, some CEO of a company, just because of the way that he ran his street business. So I'm confident that he would have been able to run a his own Fortune 500 company. I mean, for God's sakes, he had that's a whole nother, we can save that for another time. But anyway, so me raising my son successfully in Baltimore City was a matter of me trying my best to get him away, keep him away from Baltimore City. And whether it was using someone's address so that he could go to a different school, busting my butt to put him in private school, and still just trying to keep him super busy. He was not an outside child. I never let him even get acquainted with neighbors or people in the neighborhood, which others may say was not good for his social skills. But for me, watching what my parents went through with their young men had me raising my child very fearful. So I tried to keep him away from everything because I knew that it wasn't what my parents did as parents, it was the environment that they were in. So I fought really hard to keep him in areas that those things didn't exist.
Mm. You know, something you said earlier, I think it's key, and I want to go back to was early encounters. And I know that when you're dealing with children, when I first came to Baltimore City, I talked to a teacher, and she told me that one of the things that children were talking about in her classroom was, again, this is at public school, was how their coffin was going to look. You put your hands on your ears because you felt it was going to be something negative. You just
I
knew
knew
that.
it, like that's teachers go in with this idea that they're going to save the world and be able to make a difference, and it's those mortifying things that you hear come out of children's mouth that, again, like I said in the beginning, you have to go back to your purpose and your personal development to be able to not internalize that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm sorry, but you know, now for most people, that's a very shocking statement. The children are actually, because that's all what they're seeing in their life is that most of the people they know are dying at a very early age, and they're experiencing a lot of funerals, and so of course children are going to be attracted to what they see. So they're going to talk about, well, how this person coffins look, and how well the funeral, who attended. And so, with that being said, that level of trauma that's being planted into these young minds from an early age is being seeped into their very thinking. So jail and death are not even something that's foreign to them or scary to them. It's just a part of life. And sometimes it's a badge and honor if you've been shot or you go to prison. So my question for you, as you work with these parents and children at an early age, what does learning how do to help children overcome this level of traumatic experience?
Um, and I said I was gonna work on my but I'm telling you, you keep hitting me with some powerful questions that make me pause and really think. So work on it and overcome it is I don't see, I don't foresee teaching children how to, let me see. I don't foresee teaching children how to, I think just teaching children how to navigate through these systems and how to advocate for themselves in empowering them with knowledge is a way to do it. Having them to understand their greatness through their history is how they overcome it, because what we face, in my opinion, may be a little more systematic than it is whipping chain right now. It's slavery has just evolved to me. It's transitioned over into different systems. They, instead of a auction now of a young black man, we have a prison, school to prison pipeline. Instead of just coming and taking your farm, you get redline now. So I mean, it's just changed its form. So you and I have discussed this offline. I want to make sure I credit it to you that it's not so much about fighting the systems, because as you say, the systems are designed to do what they're doing. They're designed that way. It's, for me, it's about learning how to navigate through those systems. I am a recipient of those systems. I am your typical Baltimorean girl. I am a teen mom. I have all the badges. I have every badge that will get people's attention. I am a teen mom. I lost two brothers from to senseless gun violence. My other brother has been shot 7 times. I have a sister that was on drugs. Like, I am your typical, which gives me a great in with individuals in Baltimore City, unfortunately, right? When you say that, because they can resonate with you because you look like them. And let me go back to this. This is the difference between babysitters and child development as well. There's tons of research that will show that children learn best from people that look like them. And there's a reason for that. Adults resonate with individuals that look like them, that experience the same things with them, because they it allows them to be able to be vulnerable in situations. So when you walk in a room and and this is what I'm eager and I'm excited about my next level of servitude, right? Because for me, I have gotten to a certain level of success. It's not nowhere where I want to go, but a certain level of success where I can speak to both sides. I can speak to the individuals who thought that it was over, because there was a time that I thought it was over. It's devastating losing two brothers. And I know I can put on my resilience coat and walk in a room and talk about it as if I wasn't really affected, but it still affects me every day. There's something about the smell sometimes when the season changed that I have to sit in my car and just weep sometimes, just at the thought of them not being here, or the grief, or whatever. Like I said, I mentioned before, holidays, birthdays, whatever, all kinds of triggers that you have. But I think that the the I lost my train of thought, Mr. King. You're gonna have to remind me of the question. I was on a tangent, and this is what trauma does. See, I started thinking about my brothers and sharing that, and just everything went away. So you're gonna have to remind me.
Well, you were answering the question. It was talking about helping children overcome, or not overcome, because you addressed that earlier, but kind of just work through, navigate that traumatic experience that they've
Right.
seen in
So
their lives.
you teach them how to be resilient by you allow them space to grieve. And that's one thing that I'm still working on to this day, is not just treating traumatic experiences as if they don't, as if they are something that you're supposed to get over the next day. Allowing children to have that space and creating that space for them. I mentioned to you before that I had a young man in my program who saw his father murdered in front of him. That's not a space where you should go to school the next day. You should pause. You should stop and say, wait, I have. So we create that space for parents, because life doesn't stop for them. Mom still has to go to work, which in turn he has to go to school, or else the lights are going to cut off. So for us, it's creating that loving environment and making sure that we have the resources within our space, saying that, okay, well, mom, I know you have to go to work. How about, can you sign for the counselor to come here in the morning before he leaves to go to school? Or do you mind if we have someone else come in and talk to him about how to regulate his emotions? Because that's going to transition over into other things. Like, you can't expect a 7-year-old to see that kind of trauma and it not show up in some other capacity. So when he's not sitting still in school, or when he jabs his friend in the eye because he looked at him wrong, that's all that trauma that's underneath and inside of him internally. So you have to teach them how to navigate through that. Mindfulness is one that I would definitely, there's a young lady, and as soon as we're able to afford her program, I absolutely love her program. It used to be called Infinite School Focus. It's now called Climb. But mindfulness is definitely a practice that we encourage. We do with our children. Yoga, all of those different things to help them learn how to navigate, because they're not going to overcome it. They're going to continue, or it's not just something that they're in. Maybe they will overcome it. I don't want to say that. That gives it too much power. But teaching them how to navigate through it is the best thing that we do here at Learning How.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you answering my questions today. I have one last question in this particular session that we're going to do. And that question is, you've been in business for how long? I mean, I'm going to ask a series of questions before I get to my final question. I'm sorry.
Okay. I've been in business for 22 years.
And your current center, how many children do you actually serve?
We are licensed for a capacity. The building has a capacity for 96 children. We are currently serving about 80.
Now, with 20 years experience in business, serving the community the way you have, serving 80 children currently, and you said how many, what's the capacity?
96.
96. So how difficult has it been for you to raise capital for you to grow? Oh, one more quick question before you answer that. How many staff do you actually currently employ?
We currently employ, including myself, because now I'm on payroll, 8 staff members.
8 staff members. How difficult has it been for you to get access to capital to help you grow and expand your particular model methodology that you're teaching and learning how?
What's capital? Oh, that thing. Very extremely hard. So in the past, we were able to raise COVID was just like God sent for us. We that was just the
COVID
easiest.
was a godsend.
Yeah, COVID was God sent for us. We definitely are sorry for the people that it affected. I don't mean it in that way at all. Like, but what I'm saying is, I know that, man, do I want to say this on camera? Access to capital during Trump's term was a lot easier than it has been since he's been gone, for me. So what that looks like is, when we qualified for so many different resources during that term. And I don't know if it was just a coincidence, but as soon as he got out of office, all of the things that he promised, they were gone when we tried to go systems started glitching on us. All kinds of things just started happening after Trump went out of office. So But getting access to capital over the past, we didn't start really applying for capital or nope, 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 nope. I'm not telling the truth. Having the requirements that's needed for capital was something that has always been a challenge for me, or has been a challenge for our business, which is why I say that I'm glad that the level of success where I am now, I have in a position to be able to empower other individuals who are already doing great work but don't have the, oh, this is going to be ugly and we're live. So someone gave me this word the other day, one of my other mentors, and she called it what was it? We didn't have the, darn, I'll think about it, but it was the language basically that the powers at B that hold the capital need to hear. So you could be doing a phenomenal job, but unless you have that secure business plan, that because I don't know any people that just open doors and say, here's your access to capital. It has been really challenging, to answer your question. We recently got funded on this venture about 8 months ago through a one of the incubator spaces that we went in. We got a low interest revolving line of credit. But yeah, it's been extremely challenging, and I've always, just to reiterate what it's not just because of my bad doing. I've always had A1 credit. I still have A1 credit. But I didn't have all of the language to make the process work, even though I was doing the work.
Understood. Understood. Well, again, I want to thank you today, Nkenge, for taking time out of your busy schedule to answer some questions with me and join me on this discussion and actually participate in this particular series that we're going to be doing. So thank you for that. And as we get the things to close things out, I want to thank our listening audience for listening to this episode of King Connection Interviews from his Connected Intelligent Tribe. I look forward to building with you all in the future. Thank you again, Nkenge, and you have a blessed and productive remaining part of your day.
You do the same. Thank you for having me.